When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: the Eggshell. User: Kala54X. Posted August 28, 1995.
I've debated for days whether or not to write this. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not interested in arguing with trolls or having my credentials picked apart by strangers, but I can't keep this to myself anymore. Not after what I saw, what I read, and what I found in that apartment. If you're reading this, you've probably already seen Kevin's post. I didn't know he'd written it until 3 nights ago. Someone forwarded it to me through an old forum we both used to browse when we were in grad school. I sat in my car outside a hotel in Lakeland and read the whole thing in the dark, barely breathing. Let me be clear, I am a biologist. I specialize in reptilian behavior and invasive species control. Kevin and I met 7 years ago at a symposium on Everglades wetland restoration. Since then, we've published together, traveled together, and yes, we lived together for a while before he moved to Leesburg for contract work. We weren't official anymore, but we were still close. We talked shop all the time. He never shut up about field anomalies and weird clutches he'd found in roadside nests. I knew he'd found something strange in July. He mentioned it in one of our last calls, said he found a specimen that was unique, off the books, something he wanted to observe before involving the lab. I didn't ask questions. I figured it was another malformed python hybrid or one of his paranoid fantasies about undocumented imports in the pet trade. Kevin had a tendency to spiral, and I'd learned not to indulge him unless he had hard data. He didn't say. What he posted instead makes it clear this wasn't just a one-off. He was scared, obsessed, and sick, and honestly, I think he was right to be. I hadn't heard from him in 27 days. I kept telling myself he was pulling one of his disappearances, getting too wrapped up in work, probably holed up with his notes and dehydrated Thai food, but that last message, the one about needing to be near it, stuck in my head like a splinter. And when I saw the date on his post, August 6th, I knew something had gone wrong. So I drove down there. When I reached the apartment building, I knew within seconds that something was very, very wrong. The first floor was fine, dingy, sure, but quiet. But once I hit the third, the smell changed. I worked with reptiles and snake farms before, but nothing ever prepared me for this. It was chemical, floral almost, but heavy, like syrup poured over rot. The kind of scent you taste before you smell. Kevin's door wasn't locked. That's the part that still haunts me. It was cracked open just barely, like someone or something had slipped out and didn't bother to shut it behind them. I cautiously stepped inside. The air hit me first, wet, dense, almost oily. Every window was covered with dark plastic. The vents were sealed with duct tape. It was like walking into a terrarium made for something that shouldn't breathe air. I could see my breath, and yet I was sweating instantly. The place was an oven, but it wasn't the temperature that made me nauseous. It was the nest. There's no better word for it. A full ecosystem of moss, newspaper, mulch, egg cartons, insulation, plastic bins stacked like makeshift incubators, all of it tangled across the floor like a python's labyrinth. I saw heat lamps fused to the ceiling, power strips melted into the carpet, condensation dripping from the overhead fixtures. It wasn't just a mess, it was engineered with intent. Something had been living here. And then I found Kevin. He was in the bathroom, his body slumped against the tub. His eyes were open, but his blood vessels burst across the whites, lips blue, skin already starting to marinate in the humidity. His ribs were crushed inward like an old soda can. The medical examiner told me later, off the record, it looked like he'd been killed by constriction. Boa or anaconda maybe, but neither of those species are native to Central Florida, and even an escaped pet wouldn't have been able to leave the scene like that. Eerily enough, there was no snake anywhere. There was nothing in the tub but a layer of slime and a few long white scratches in the porcelain, as if something with claws or something with scales had been thrashing around inside. I stumbled backward into the hallway, and that's when I saw the fragments. Dozens of leathery eggshells scattered across the floor like broken teacups, pale green, speckled with thick black residue clinging to the inside. One still had something in it, a curled claw, half-formed, glistening in the hallway light. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the whole building to the ground, but instead, I ran. I didn't stop until I was at the Shell station on 44, hands shaking as I called emergency services. I didn't mention the nest. I didn't say anything about the eggs. I just told them I found my colleague dead. The authorities sealed the unit, declared it an accidental death, and wouldn't answer any more questions. But you and I know that's not true. I read his notes. I saw the bin where he kept the egg. I recognized the outlines of his process, the heating cycle patterns, the misting rhythms. It was textbook incubation, but this thing, whatever it was, didn't just hatch. It thrived, and if it's anything like other reptiles, it did not do it alone. It was gestating, growing, maybe even multiplying, and now it's gone. I've worked with Burmese pythons in the glades. I've seen what happens when a top predator enters an ecosystem with no natural enemies. They don't just adapt, they dominate. And this was an adaptation. This was foreign biology, maybe engineered, maybe ancient, but it was never meant to be found, and it isn't the only one, I promise. So I'm posting this here because you people are the only ones who might believe me. If any of you have seen egg clusters like this, leathery, oversized, faintly luminescent, report it immediately. If you smell honeysuckle in a place that shouldn't smell like anything at all, leave immediately. And if your colleague or your partner or your friend suddenly becomes obsessed with a specimen they won't describe, check on them immediately. Do it fast. Because Kevin didn't die from obsession. He was selected. He was fed to something we were never meant to see, and that thing is loose now, somewhere here in Central Florida, or maybe beyond. I don't know how far it's gotten, but I know one thing for sure. It is still hungry.
Subject, always midnight. User was 4D. Posted April 25th, 1998.
I'm not sure when it started. I want to say sometime in April maybe, but honestly, time's been slippery lately. You live in a squat cinder block apartment just off Frontage Road outside Pittsburgh. 10 units, 1 entrance, no reason to remember it unless you live here. Can't leave. Well, every morning my alarm goes off at 6:47 a.m. Not 6:45, not 6:50. I didn't set it that way, not that I can recall, but I don't change it either. It just does it, and it works. I wake up, sit on the edge of the bed with my feet on the cold linoleum, and let the radio hum static for a few seconds before I kill it. Quick tap on the top and move on. Then it's a shower. I've used the same brand of soap for who knows how long, and the same towel that never really dries. I brush my teeth, ignore the cracked molar again, and walk out to catch the 7:15 bus into downtown. I make it down there about 7:12, and Cheryl is almost always waiting with a pleasant smile before turning back to stare at the paper. I work on the 3rd floor of an office building that used to be something else. Maybe a bank, maybe a Sears. Now, it's just rows of beige desks and flickering fluorescent lights. I log data from paper forms into a system so old the monitor is green and black and hums when I type too fast. I don't talk to anyone unless I have to. I bring my lunch, tuna sandwich, carrot sticks, and a cookie. Always a cookie. After work, I walk 2 blocks back to the bus stop, ride home, stop by the corner store and grab a 6-pack. I don't know the guy behind the counter's name, and he doesn't know mine. I think that's part of the design, though. Dinner is something easy. Macaroni with hot dogs sliced in, or frozen Salisbury steak and a can of green beans. I eat in front of the TV. Always in front of the TV. Reruns of sitcoms mostly. Cheers, Night Court, Wings. I nod off a little, then, without really deciding to, I stand up and shuffle into the bedroom. I check the clock and it always seems to say 12 a.m. Not blinking, just 12 a.m. It doesn't matter if I fell asleep at 7 or stayed up until 11:30. When I look at the clock, it's always midnight. At first, I figured it was busted, so I replaced it. New one from Radio Shack, but same thing. Then, I picked up one of those self-setting models that syncs with the radio towers. Supposed to be accurate to the second, didn't matter. Still midnight. The days have started getting fuzzy, but I can't tell for how long. It'd be Tuesday. I swear to God it'd be Tuesday, but when I got to work, the receptionist would say, "Happy Wednesday," or "Can you believe it's already hump day?" But then I'd look out the window at lunch and the guy across the street would be hauling the same box into the same van he'd hauled on Monday. I swear, he'd be wearing the same mustard yellow parka even though the weather keeps saying 72 and clear. I tried writing it down, bought a little black notebook from Walgreens, dated each page, tracked my meals, bus rides, conversations, even dreams. But I'd go back the next day and half of it would be blank. Or worse, changed. One entry said I saw a man standing in my kitchen while I was in the shower. Another said I opened my fridge and all the food had price tags on it like I was in a store. I don't think I wrote those, but yet they were there. Sure enough, that was my handwriting, all right. Then, one day I called myself from work, left a message on my answering machine. "This is Dave, this is real, you're not crazy, it's Tuesday." When I got home that night, the tape was blank, except for breathing. My breathing, I think, but it was slower, like I was sleeping. To top all this off, I don't dream anymore either, and I don't know when that happened, and if I do dream, I can't seem to hold on to them. I wake up with my jaw clenched, heart pounding, but no images, just a pressure in my chest like someone sat on me all night. And before you ask, yeah, I tried staying up once. Kept flipping through the cable box, 30 channels, half of them snow, until the glow burned behind my eyelids. I made it to 2:11 a.m., and that's the last thing I remember. Next thing I know, it's 6:47 a.m. Alarm is going, radio static, my breath fogs in the room like I never turn the heat on, my socks are wet, my pants are covered in dirt, time to go see Cheryl. I found mud on the carpet that morning, not from outside, from inside. Little specks leading toward the bathroom, then vanishing, like whatever brought them in didn't leave the way it came. Sometimes I hear footsteps above me, I think, or maybe that's not a real memory. I don't know. No one lives upstairs anyway. Sometimes I hear laughter coming from the TV when it's not on. Sometimes I pick up the phone and hear someone else dialing in before I even say hello. Last week, or at least I think it's last week, I went to the diner down the street just to break the cycle, sat in a booth, ordered eggs and hash. The waitress looked at me funny when I asked what day it was. "Sweetie," she said, real soft, "you came in yesterday and asked me the same thing. And the day before that, I thought you were just lonely." Maybe I am. Maybe this is what lonely looks like. Maybe this is just the shape life takes when no one remembers you, when you don't matter, when you slip through the cracks and nobody notices you're gone. But that's the thing. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still here. I punch the clock, I eat the food, I drink the beer, I laugh when the TV tells me to, and then I check the clock again. Midnight. Always midnight.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.